Hey everybody, it's Gary again. I'm back. Yeah, I intended to give you a day off, but eventually we'll get there. Hopefully something will happen and I'll be too busy to record a video, and maybe you guys can get a break from me for a day or so. Every time I do one of these videos, inevitably, immediately after finishing, I locate more vinyl CDs by that artist that I wanted to show, or there's some points that I forget to bring up that I wanted to bring up in the video. And because my original video is so long, not only would it make it longer, but I certainly don't want to go in and re-record it, when I've been talking for 40 minutes to an hour, which is long enough to make you all suffer anyway. Do I really want to go back and start from scratch again? No. And I remember that happening with the Terry Riley video that I did. I found a bunch of CDs and vinyl as well after I recorded that. It happened with Mark Isham's thing, where I found like another 5 soundtracks, including a couple on vinyl. I typically what I've done is, as much as I want to continue in the next video and say, oh, by the way, I forgot this or I forgot that, people could potentially watch these out of order or not watch certain ones and not know what I'm talking about. So I've avoided that. But I have to amend that rule for myself today, because yesterday I was doing an Azimuth video and talking about some of the solo work of the 3 members of Azimuth, Kenny Wheeler, Norma Winstone, and John Tjader, and I had pulled out a bunch of things that I had done, that I had from solo projects of Kenny Wheeler and Norma Winstone, and forgot to pull the John Tjader. And considering how underappreciated he is amongst jazz pianists, this is the first time I'm going to kind of go back on my own set of rules and kind of do an amendment a little bit before I get on to today's subject, and just mention, show a little bit of John Tjader's side projects, of which he has many. But actually, the first place I heard John Tjader was here in the Jan Garbutt group in the 1978 album, which I've shown. I think I've shown before I've mentioned it. Because there's a whole lot of talent on here. Bill Connors is on here, Everhard Weber's on this, John Christensen is on this, and John Tjader on piano, strictly acoustic piano, which is the first place that I heard him. But prior, in 1977, prior to that, I don't think I got this one till later, and I love this cover. On the prior Jan Garbutt group project album, or actually, this didn't come out as Jan Garbutt group, did it? No, it just came out as a Jan Garbutt solo album. But it's a quartet. It's essentially a group. I guess he started using the group name in '78. But the prior album in '77 also had John Tjader on it, and Bill Connors on guitar, as a matter of fact, and Jack DeJohnette on drums, no bass player. And this was the first time that John Tjader apparently played organ. Or at least I'm sure I read that this is the first time that he used it. Apparently there was an organ in the studio on this date that was recorded in December, I think. December '77. And that was the thing that got John Tjader interested in using some electric keyboards in the first place when he recorded with Azimuth. He started initially with a synthesizer in Azimuth, but dropped that after the first album and actually used a great deal of organ in the second, third, and fourth Azimuth albums. And this is kind of where he got the idea from. So I thought that was interesting, and it wasn't his own idea. I think there was an organ in the studio, and especially not having a bass player with the organ having bass pedals, I think Jan Garbutt encouraged him to use it. On to just a few things. This is going to be quick as far as John Tjader goes. I just wanted to make mention he's done many solo albums. So what I have by him is nothing that is definitive, or maybe not even a good overview, maybe, of his solo stuff. But what he did do that some people may know, possibly, that aren't really even familiar with John Tjader, is he recorded Pete Erskine, the drummer from Weather Report of all places, recorded 4 solo albums, or formed a trio, and recorded 4 of these trio albums for the ECM label with a set band. He formed a piano bass drums trio, and he got John Tjader as the pianist, and is it Pally Danielson on bass. A lot of people really like these, and a lot of people bought these that are more Pete Erskine fans than John Tjader fans, so a lot of people got exposed to John Tjader through this. Good cover, too. I like that cover. And they did 4 albums for the ECM label. And there's a lot of John Tjader writing on here. I mean, if you just put the disc on, you would assume it was the piano players, was the leader of the group. Obviously, he's the lead voice. But it's also a lot of his writing. On this one, only about half of the writing is John Tjader's. But I understand on the others, which I thought I had, and I don't think I do now, looking at the covers. I have to rectify that. This is a great album. Very, very introspective, not avant-garde at all. John Tjader's not really a avant-garde piano player, fists pounding on the piano kind of thing. Anyway, but this is pure beauty, and this is again, this is one of those albums that you could kind of put on maybe for people that don't like jazz so much, and it's quite introspective, quite reflective, and very beautiful, and very, very high quality recorded. And I was surprised to find out I didn't have more of the Pete Erskine trio. And I remember how absolutely shocked I was. First of all, Pete Erskine was recording for ECM because I knew him like a lot of other people knew. He's the drummer for Weather Report. What's he doing on ECM? And I got this album and I was knocked out. And then I read a little bit more into his history and realized he comes from more of a mainstream big band jazz tradition. Then he does really the kind of fusion rocky thing that he got known for during the Jaco Pastorius years, really, with Weather Report, which is the period that he was in the group. They were pretty aggressive, pretty rocky stuff back then during those Weather Report years. I didn't know his history, and I've since I've had other things by Pete Erskine outside of this trio. This would be my favorite thing that Pete Erskine did, certainly. But he's done other things which are very interesting albums from large band albums too, with big bands in there. My main reason, of course, showing that is not Pete Erskine so much, but John Tjader. And John Tjader, I can't believe I did it again. I left the John Tjader CD back in the. Oh. Anyway, Anyway, John Tjader has recorded many trio albums as a leader. This is just, an example of one of them. Blue Glass, this is called. And this was actually, he doesn't do a lot of live recording albums. Most of the albums are recorded in the studio, in the recording studio. This is actually a live album recorded at the famous Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club in England. I think it's in London. I'm pretty sure it's in London. And he has a trio on here is Steve Argelis on drums and Mick Hutton on bass. He has he's got a bunch of recordings with the same trio with a different bassist and drummer. I think Martin France is the drummer, and I don't recall who the bassist is offhand. And he's made a bunch of recordings with them, so it seems like he had a regular jazz trio for a lot of recordings. Plus, he's done solo piano recordings. And I had one to show you, but I don't think it's here. It's like the curse of John Tjader. Oh, it's not here. I grabbed the Kenny Wheeler disc that I showed yesterday, thinking that it was the John Tjader solo piano album that I have. But here's one for John Tjader fans. And I thought it was a John Tjader solo album. Strange, because it's a full-length album, but they packaged it in a mini slipcase, like a CD single slipcase, which is great for storage, because I think probably anybody watching this video has problems with storage with the amount of CDs we all have. But there's information in here, all the same, so you're not really missing out on stuff. Liner notes and everything. This is a standout, and considering that most John Tjader recordings are piano, acoustic piano, this is him on one of those big old church organs, and Ian Carr on trumpet, and that's it. So it's Ian Carr's album. I guess it was his concept, whatever. But I mean, there's probably more of John Taylor playing in here than there is Ian Carr. Tons of just beautiful church organ, and the music is impressionistic. I wouldn't really say abstract. Maybe skirts along that slightly, but doesn't get intensely out there. But I read a couple of reviews of this where people say this is definitely late night music, and the interesting thing is it actually was recorded late at night on 2 different nights. They started sometime around 10 p.m. or midnight or something like that, and recorded all the way to dawn. So it's a really late night album, and they were letting that, I guess, vibe permeate the church that they recorded this in. And they did that over 2 nights, and they compiled the material onto this album, which is about 50-something minutes long. So it's a full-length album. I thought maybe I was the only one that got the slipcase like this, but somebody else's review mentioned it too, that I saw, I think, on Amazon. And unfortunately, the third disc that I pulled, which I thought was a John Taylor solo album, is actually a solo piano album that I wanted to show. It's actually a Kenny Wheeler album that I showed. And I could get up and tell you to talk amongst yourselves while I go get it, but you know what? I would get there and probably I misfiled it or something. So onto the main band for today, and it's still going to be short, I hope. Double Image, which was a band that recorded for a whole bunch of different labels, even though they didn't record a lot of albums. I think almost every album they came out with was on a different label. How did I find out about Double Image? Well, let's go back to one of the great ECMs from 1982, I think. May 1981 it was recorded, probably came out around 82, and that's the Gallery album, which is one of those classic ECM albums that sound like the kind of chamber jazz that ECM is known for, and it definitively sounds like an ECM album, which is why no one can understand why it never got re-released on CD, never came out on CD. So through this band, which had some people I was familiar with, Mike DePasqua, the great drummer that at this time was playing with everybody on the ECM stable. He is playing with the Jan Garber group, which is the only opportunity I ever got to see him play live. He retired from music, and he's a relatively young guy. And I believe he lives in Florida, and a little note, Michael, it's not too late to come out of retirement, buddy. Because he's one of the few drummers that can play in that John Christensen style, that gets it. One of the most interesting drum solos I've ever heard in my life. Right up there with the John Christensen drum solo, where they don't sit there bashing the kit and just show how fast and how much noise they can make, but actually try to construct a musical drum solo. And I'm going on about Mike DePasqua, and I'm talking about Double Image, and yet I'm showing a Gallery album. Well, with this album, we're almost halfway there. I was familiar with Mike DePasqua, the drummer, but I wasn't familiar with Dave Samuels, the vibraphone marimba player on this album. The vibraphone marimba is really the primary instrument that lays everything down because there's no piano on here. The other members on this particular album, Ratso Harris was the bass player, Paul McCandless, the reed player from Oregon, and David Darling on cello. And I was familiar with David Darling already. It's a great combination of musicians. But the primary harmonic instrument laying that bass down that everybody plays on top of is Dave Samuels, vibraphone and marimba, and I immediately loved his playing. And, I was already familiar with most of the other guys, really except for Ratso Harris. This is probably the first place that I heard the bass player. The other guys I knew from Oregon and David Darling from his many solo albums. And since Gallery didn't come out with anything else, ever, I went looking for other Dave Samuels recordings. And what did I find? Well, I found two of the members of Gallery had, in October 78, so it's over 3 years prior, been in a band together called Double Image. And they had recorded an album, this is their only one for ECM, called Dawn. And who was in it? Mike DePasqua, the drummer from Gallery. Great. I knew him. I loved him. Dave Samuels. Well, I was looking for more Dave Samuels stuff. Harvey Swartz on bass, which actually is somebody that I knew. because there was a jazz label around for a short time called Gramavision that had recorded a couple albums, had Harvey Schwartz as a leader of the band, and it was almost, fairly ECM-ish type of music on some of the records he made. And then there's this, interestingly enough, in this quartet, there's a second vibraphone marimba player. So you got two vibraphone marimba players, upright bass and drums. And the second vibraphone marimba player is a guy named David Friedman, who I was not familiar with. I think I had read his name or heard of him. And so through my love of that Gallery album, I got, 2/4 of this group are guys in Gallery. And I love that idea of having two vibes players. And the fact that they both play marimba, which is, the wooden instrument, like vibraphone thing. Very, very different sound, very percussive. So it's a great color combination, as somebody like Steve Reich can tell you, because he's used, especially in something like Music for 18 Musicians, where he uses a ton of combination of vibraphones and marimbas, because they just sound great together. And this is, a very, very unique idea for an improvising jazz band to have two vibraphone marimba players and a rhythm section, upright bass and drums. So, and I knew everybody pretty much but David Friedman on here. And the record was as good as I thought it was. And here we go again, just like the Gallery album. What does ECM got against vibraphone players? They never put this album out on CD. Did they not like vibraphone players, maybe? I don't know. I can think of the Adelhard Reutinger album, which also has a vibraphone player on it, which is a great album, another one that sounds typically like an ECM album, and another one that they didn't put out on CD. Maybe Manfred Eicher decided he didn't like vibraphone after all. So we might have solved the mystery. So, digging back a little bit more, I discovered that Double Image had recorded a prior album. That one I showed you was from '78. In '77, they had done one for the Enja record label. I don't think Enja's around anymore. That would be a real shame. They were almost like, if you're a hardcore ECM fan and you were around in the late '70s, early '80s, Enja was kind of like a little sister almost. I mean, the companies weren't related at all, but there's a lot of carryover on the musicians onto the Enja label, and even the musicians that maybe hadn't recorded for ECM, the style of music, they were very much into a modern jazz kind of thing and a chamber jazz kind of thing on Enja. And they recorded some mainstream guys on Enja as well. But they did a lot of this stuff. And again, Double Image, which was, the same four guys, David Friedman and David Samuels, both on vibes and marimba. Dave Samuels they both play a little bit of percussion on here as well. Harvey Schwartz on bass and the great Mike DePasqua on drums. And most of the writing comes from the two vibe players, but Harvey Schwartz does get a track in here, and there is apparently a group of improvisation on here that's credited to all four members. If there's anything there you can see. Nice cover. Very much like an ECM cover, too. And this was the prior album from '77. It didn't seem that this was really an ongoing band, though, because nothing got heard from them after that ECM album. It took a lot of, it took a bunch of years, because the first one was '77, you had one in '78, and then you heard nothing. And it wasn't until, and I don't think I've skipped or missed any albums by them, it wasn't until October '85, that's a bit of a gap there, that another Double Image album came out, and again, it came out in a different label, Celestial Harmonies. Now, New Age fans will probably know this label. Another album called Inlands I Never Saw. But this was different. There was no rhythm section here. Sadly, no Mike DePasqua, no Harvey Schwartz. It was an album just of the two vibraphone players, so David Friedman and David Samuels. The two Daves. And this was, obviously different without the rhythm section. Maybe quieter. Interesting. Good album, though. Good album. Another good album by them. But that gap in all those years from '78 to '85, leads me to think that they probably didn't tour a whole heck of a lot. Maybe when they came out with an album, they would do a little tour and then go back to whatever other projects. Now I was surprised because for a long time when I discovered the Celestial Harmonies record from '85, which I think came out in '86, it seemed like that was it for them. I didn't hear from them again, and there was another huge gap. In November of '93, they did record another album though, but again, that's a long gap. They recorded this one called Open Hand. And again, it was just the two Vibe guys, Dave Samuels, Dave Friedman. And this was actually a live performance. So this one is probably my least favorite. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's a live performance, and if you're going to only have the two Vibe players, it's a bit limiting, in a live context, whereas the previous album, In Lands I Never Saw, which only had these two guys playing, nonetheless, was done in the studio, and there's some overdubbing on there, so they could get as much of the colors or rhythms that they wanted, and be able to put layers of things on there. This being a live performance, you can't do that, so you're really kind of restricted here. So it's not bad. Probably if I heard this, on its own, not knowing anything else about the band, I still think it's fantastic. But the other three albums really have a lot going for them, and they're kind of hard to top. What I didn't know, I'm probably the only guy in the world who knows who Dave Samuels is, who was totally clueless for many, many years that he was in Spyro Gyra, the pop smooth jazz group. And I don't know if he played on the first album. He would sometimes tour the band, sometimes not. He was on their very early albums, and right off from the bat, they were a hit group. And later on, I ended up buying a bunch of their stuff, just to, I don't even know why, but, they had some interesting players in and out of the group at times. Dave Samuels being probably the best of them. And he was, his vibes in marimba were a big part of the sound on some of those early albums, and they had a couple, like smooth jazz hit single things. And I remember the marimba being a big part of that. And I totally didn't know he had any history with them. I listened to him for probably close to, 6 or 7 or 8 years before I even found that out about him. So to me, he was the guy in Gallery and Double Image. And here he is in this extremely popular pop jazz band. And he came and went a few times in that group. Came back, did some guest appearances. But I think in the early days he was actually touring with them. Which probably would have coincided with the late 70s, possibly the late 70s, when there was that gap in the Double Image albums. So that's possibly what he was doing. Though I know he also was a teacher at a music college here in New Jersey for a number of years, where during his tenure, I didn't know about this, good friend of mine at the time, his younger sister was going to this music college in New Jersey, and mentioned that Dave Samuels was a teacher there, which blowed us over, bowled us over, whatever. We didn't know that. We were a big fan of his. I had no idea where the guy lived or, that he was teaching anything anywhere. And the reason she told us is because, he's giving a free concert on Sunday afternoon. And it turned out to be a Reformed Gallery concert. For free! For free! And, Gallery, I bought the album when it came out. I was totally unaware that they did any touring. So to get to see them for free, it was a few years after the album, though. I want to, a couple of years at least. I want to say it was probably late in '83, I think. But Paul McCandless was there. David Darling was there. I got to speak to both of them actually after the concert, and Dave Samuels on Vibe. Ratso Harris, the bassist on the Gallery album, was not with them, but filling in was Mark Johnson. Mark Johnson wasn't quite the name that he became, but Mark Johnson at that point had already played with Bill Evans, so that's quite a pedigree he already had. He sounded really good with the group too. Mike DePasqua did not play drums. They had a very temporary guy fill in who was not he might have even been a student. He was not a known person in the jazz world at that point, whoever this drummer was. And the reason that Mike DePasqua didn't play is he hadn't retired yet. He was actually on a tour with the Jan Garbrick group. I had actually seen the Jan Garbrick group just the night before on a Saturday night in New York City play, and I saw Mike DePasqua. Getting back to Dave Samuels. Dave Samuels did go on to GRP Records, which for me and many, many jazz people, you probably moan when you hear GRP records. They're very, very commercial side of the jazz thing, radio-friendly pop jazz and all that. And so I got this Dave Samuels album. I'm not sure, I think possibly at the time I was expecting a gallery or double image type album. And I bought this before I realized that he was a member of Spyro Gyra. But when I heard it, I was kind of like, wow, that's really slick, 93. Maybe I was aware, and knowing, I already knew the GRP label and the kind of music they put out. So, I bought it anyway, and I was kind of hoping that maybe this would be one of their less commercial things. But it kind of, from what I remember, I haven't spun this for a while, and I should put it on. From what I remember, it kind of sounds like a Spyro Gyra album. So I remember being disappointed. He also started a group. 2003 disc. I don't have all of these things. 2001, which might have started before. He started a group, Dave Samuels, called Caribbean Jazz Project, and it's just like the title says. It's a kind of Caribbean jazz kind of music. And was this on GRP? No, this is Concord. I'm surprised. Again, it almost sounds like a GRP recording. It's very slick. Very slick. And again, I was a little disappointed. But with the Caribbean jazz thing, I kind of knew what I was getting into. There's nothing wrong with any of the playing, any of the music. It's just a little commercial. It's very radio-friendly type of stuff. And yet, the musicians on here, some of them anyway, Steve Kahn on guitar, which has nothing to do with Caribbean jazz, but he kind of, I don't recall the guitar being very prominent in this, but Dave Valentin on flute, who's well-known and kind of well-known in this, in this kind of, slightly Latin jazz type of thing. So he is in the group. A whole bunch of people I haven't heard of. Richie Flores, who I have heard of, playing some hand percussion, and Ray Vega, who is a flugelhorn player that I've heard of, does a guest appearance on here, as well as Pancho Sanchez, who plays congas on one track. And Pancho Sanchez is very well known in the kind of Latin jazz community from many recordings, and playing with Tjader and all these kind of people. But this is, it's just, this isn't my, the fact is there's a sameness to many of the tracks when you pursue something, I think, in this direction. Here's a couple years later. They did more than these two, I'm pretty sure. Did another one. Sure who the players are. Yeah, the player's almost completely different on this one, though. Ray Vega does play on this. Guest artists. Randy Brecker does play trumpet on this. Oh, and Mark Walker on drums. Hey, Mark Walker. The current drummer for Oregon. Young guy, too. He's got solo albums out, but I'm still waiting for the definitive, for me, Dave Samuels solo album, because it seems like a big part of the direction of Gallery and Double Image was his music, and yet these other solo albums don't really reflect that so much. This one does a bit more, though it's not a Dave Samuels solo album. Pianist Andy Laverne made this record with Dave Samuels and Jay Anderson on upright bass in November 1998. This would probably be more, if you're familiar with the Gallery double image stuff, this would probably be more into your liking. And because there's no drums on here or anything, it's just those three guys. So it's, it's a nice acoustic piano, the vibe marimba thing going on the upright bass. It's a little more spacious on Steeplechase. Steeplechase is a pretty well-known label. And that was recorded in 98. So if I were going to play, or when I go to put on some Dave Samuels music besides Gallery, which I've listened to, 9,000 times, or the double image, which I've probably listened to 5,000 times, all of them, I tend to go to this one. It's a little more spacious. And how much do I love the double image? As I took my vinyl copy from ECM Records of the Dawn album, and I ripped it myself into my computer and edited all the tracks just because I love that album so much and I don't want to wear out the vinyl. And that's living proof of it. Also, the other half or quarter, depending on what generation of double image you look at, is David Friedman, who's certainly no slack himself, who's done many projects as a sideman, and I'm, not attempting to. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of him at all, David Friedman. All I know is he's a damn good vibraphone player. But here's an interesting project that he was on, and this is also something called Other Worlds, and it's a mostly a trio album. There is a guest percussionist on some of the tracks, but this is a trio album on the Intuition label. Intuition's one of the more recent jazz labels that Oregon recorded a bunch of albums for. Good label, great production values and stuff. Though it has an accordionist as one of the three members, I really don't like. I have to be honest, I don't like accordion very much. Just like I don't like tuba very much. But I bought this because I knew it was going to sound good, and I could probably stomach the accordion. And it's a pretty good album called Other Worlds. Dave Friedman plays marimba, vibraphone, and percussion, with Anthony Cox playing upright and electric bass. So interesting little combination there. You've got a bassist who plays upright and electric, vibraphone and marimba player, and an accordion. Quite odd. There's a Francois Verly playing as a guest on percussion, and I don't know, I don't recall how much of that additional percussion is on there, because Dave Friedman, does play some percussion on here as well. But Other Worlds, interesting, well-recorded album on the Intuition label from 1997. Can't believe it's that long ago. And like I said, Dave Friedman's done a lot of things on other people's albums as a sideman. But this one that caught my eye, because I'm a sucker for solo albums, I had this closed the wrong way, and the cover was confusing me. Like why it didn't look right. It didn't look right because I had the CD booklet filled the wrong way. Here's a David Friedman album. What's it called? I don't know. Let me look at the title. It's called Air Sculpture. And this is from 1994 on a German label I've never heard of. I don't even think I don't even remember looking at the label name. Called Traumton, Traumton Records. Traumton Records. Never heard of them. Record company based out of Germany. And I came across this one and bought it. And I was thinking that Dave Samuels would be my preferred vibraphone player in the double image group. But this is what I was kind of hoping to hear from Dave Samuels. And I got it from Dave Friedman. A solo album. I mean, a real solo album. No other musicians. I'm a sucker for those albums. I've talked at length with them before. And that's what this is. From 94, it's nothing but David Friedman on vibe and marimba and overdubbing. Let me double check, but I'm pretty sure there's no... Yeah, old titles. He does on Green Dolphin Street, the jazz standard, on here. Apart from that, everything is his. Everything else is his. And, this of all the solo albums, and I really am such a hardcore Dave Samuels fan that I really never thought that I would find a Dave Friedman album that I preferred over the Dave Samuels stuff. I'm still waiting for Dave Samuels to do that kind of definitive solo album that I like. And Dave Friedman kind of hit it out of the park with this one. Air Sculpture, very nice. Don't know if it's still in print. I didn't buy this one immediately when it first came out, so it may still be. Just solo vibes and marimba. Probably the closest thing to this album is the double image in Lands I Never Saw, which was the studio album that they recorded without the rhythm section, just Dave Samuels and Dave Friedman. And they were fantastic. That was a fantastic group, and I'm hoping someday in some way they will record again. And that's it. So that's my John Tjader addendum to yesterday's Azimuth video. And I still ended up pulling the wrong album. I wanted to show a solo album, solo piano album by John Tjader, and I pulled out the wrong album. But at least the thought was there, and John Tjader is getting his due in my video, his much deserved due. And that's until next time. I have no idea what's next, actually. I may have run out of ideas, but the viewers would probably not be that lucky, We'll come and talk about washing my bed sheets or something if I run out of CDs to show. Okay, guys, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.